Hey, Tommy from the Run Testers. In this video, we are going to be doing a versus of the new Nike Alphafly 3 and the quite old now Alphafly 1 to see how the old version compares with the latest version. Right, let's dive in and see what we both thought. The original Nike Alphafly cost £259.95 in the UK and $275 in the US. You can still find it, but it can be hard, although when you do, you can often get it at quite a cheap price. The Nike Alphafly 3 costs £284.99 or $285. It weighs 202 grams or 7.1 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 8mm. When the original Nike Alphafly was released, it cost £259.95 or $275 in the US. It weighs 208 grams or 7.3 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 4mm. The Nike Alphafly was one of the most eagerly anticipated carbon plate shoes when it was released back in 2020, and still remains at the top of the list for many runners when it comes to race day. The combination of a carbon plate with a chunky stack of ZoomX foam, as well as 2 Zoom Air pods in the forefoot, produced an impressively bouncy ride, producing much needed energy return and comfort for long distance efforts. The fact that the shoe is still highly sought after and still retains its popularity despite the launch of 2 newer versions, as well as dozens of worthy contenders from other brands, is an impressive feat for a shoe launched 4 years ago. The third version of one of the world's most popular race shoes sees a number of updates. That includes a wider carbon plate to increase stability, a new midsole design that features fully connected ZoomX foam for a smoother ride, and a revamped AtomKnit upper for better lockdown as well as breathability. The Alphafly 3 still has all the elements runners have come to expect from the shoe, including its hallmark dual air zoom units in the forefoot and its impressive notched laces. However, this time it's lighter than the previous version, aiming to provide an even faster ride. Right, Nick, hit me. Fit in the 2 Alphaflys.
Fit is the same for both of them. For me, Tom, I've got a UK 9 in both shoes. It's comfortable size, enough room around the toe box, good hold in the heel and midfoot. Got a slightly different heel padding design. I don't tend to love the little strip of padding that we have on the Alphafly 1, which can have the potential to irritate my Achilles a bit more than the more hugging design on the Alphafly 3. But overall, my experience with the fit is the same in both shoes. I would stick with your normal size. You, Tom?
Mm-hmm. So I've now had 3 pairs of Alphafly 1s. 2 of the pairs have been absolutely perfect, very comfortable for a race shoe. I think it is well sized. I don't think it's too small or too tight or anything like that. But one of the pairs that I did get had a major arch issue on it, and I couldn't get a nice comfortable fit in that one. But I haven't had the same problem with the other 2 pairs. So I would stay to my size, UK size 8 in the Alphafly 1. Alphafly 3, pretty much the same. I don't have any problems with it at all. I think it's actually one of the nicest super shoes to put on straight away, because some shoes super shoes I do find that they take a couple of runs to get comfortable in, but these are, I think the Alphaflys are really comfortable from the off.
Yeah, and the Alphafly 1 did have a kind of famous arch issue that I never really had with it, but it's good that you haven't had it with the 3, having had it on one version of the 1. So I've never been able to say if it's been fixed on the Alphafly 3 because I didn't have it with the Alphafly 1 or 2, but it's a less noticeable arch, I'd say, on that shoe.
Okay, so the run test, Nick. We've done a lot of runs. I've used the Alphafly 1 for marathons, many races of those 3 different versions of it I've had. And then you've actually done quite a lot of miles in the Alphafly 3 now. I've done a fair bit. I did a half marathon at the weekend. How's the run test been for you? How would you compare these 2 shoes?
So a slightly different one for us, obviously, that we're comparing a shoe that's 2 generations away from the newest one. We've skipped out the Alphafly 2, that's because Tom hasn't used it, and it's not as beloved by runners as the Alphafly 1, which has achieved cult-like status now, it's fair to say. Like, I remember actually when I really liked it originally came out, a lot of people telling me it's not as good as the Vaporfly. Well, look at you now, you all love the Alphafly 1 and you don't like any shoes since. But I think they're both amazing shoes. Did my first sub 2:30 marathon in the Alphafly 1. I've got up to 20 miles in the Alphafly 3 as training for my current block towards the London Marathon, and I think they're both amazing. From now on in, as we talk about all differences and our preferences, I think it's fair to say we probably both agree these are very good carbon shoes. You're not going to do yourself an injustice by using either of them, but they are a little bit different. And I do prefer the ride of the Alphafly 3 because of the way Nike is now setting up this midsole with the continuous midsole and the way that it engages the Air Zoom pods. I think you basically get a faster, more aggressive transition onto the pods with the newer shoe. And as someone who is a high cadence runner and a heel striker, I find that it pushes me forward onto those air zoom pods, and I get a more aggressive, ride for racing. So I think it turns over a bit faster, and I get a slightly more explosive toe off. Whereas the Alphafly 1, which again I did love a lot, I think is a more bounce-based carbon shoe. So that's what's different. I think in general the difference between carbon shoes, that's how I'm grouping them these days, is the bounce-based ones and the more tippy forward, aggressive ones. I think the Alphafly 3 is kind of in the middle, but it's much more towards the tippy forward feeling of things like the Vaporfly than previous versions of the shoe. Alphafly 1 is really, really bouncy. Alphafly 2 was also absurdly bouncy, but it added a bit of weight, which some runners didn't like. But the Alphafly 1, is more of a bounce-based shoe, still very aggressive, but I think I prefer the more tippy forward, style of the Alphafly 3, which I think also makes it a better shoe because it's a lighter shoe for the short distances as well compared to the Alphafly 1, which I did really like for marathons, but have raced 10k in it. Even just last year, we both did a 10k in it, and it's good for that as well. But again, I just like the way basically the geometry is set up on the new shoe. I think is that little bit more tippy forward as opposed to bouncy. Tom, what do you feel about bounce and tip forward?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because I love soft, bouncy shoes, and I like to feel that bounce as I'm running in it. And I think that the Alphafly, the first time I tried the Alphafly 1, you just notice it straight away, don't you? It's just, you can feel that massive chunk of squishy foam, ZoomX foam. You can feel those AirPods, and it just does feel like you're bouncing along, and I love that. And I like it for every distance. So I've raced every distance in the Alphafly 1, and I like it for all of it, really. There was a point where I preferred the Vaporfly to the Alphafly for short distance, but over time I've actually just using the Alphafly for all of those things. I went with the Alphafly 3. It's a bit of a tricky one, because I think you're right. I think it is a different ride, and I think it's largely due to that fully connected outsole, and it's definitely fast. It feels to me a little bit more like it's veering towards the Vaporfly than the Alphafly 1 to me. I get a very similar feeling from the Vaporfly and the Alphafly 3, and that's fine. It's definitely a fast shoe, but it's not a noticeably bouncy shoe, which and when I'm out, I did a half marathon in it on Sunday, I could just, by the end of the race, I just felt like I wasn't getting any, I don't know, it's definitely bounce, but help the final stages of it for my style of running. And I also do think that, I know that they're pretty similar in terms of how rigid they are because of the plate and everything, but I do feel that the foam in the Alphafly 3 is a little bit squishier, and I do feel like I'm sort of compressing into the ground a little bit more, which I don't like as much, whereas this just, the Alphafly 1 feels like you really get that energy back from when you hit the ground. It feels a lot more compressive, and yeah, I just much prefer the Alphafly 1 for pretty much every run that I've done. I've done quite a lot. I've done about 80k in the Alphafly 3 now, and I like it, but at the start of testing it, I just wasn't sure. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I'm definitely veering towards the Alphafly 1 at the moment, just for anything. Really.
Yeah, so I think we'll talk about running style quite a lot. I think it's probably where the differences will come into this a little bit. It's almost the difference between the way ASICS sets up its shoes and the style, the cadence and the thing. But I don't put, I put a lot of force into shoes because I'm a pretty fast runner, but my running style is quite shuffly, very high cadence style. And I think actually with the Alphafly 1, I had to lock in quite a lot and stay in, really focus on getting the best out of the shoe. So when I did my sub 230 marathon, it was a PB at the time and around Dorney Lake. I remember the last few miles, shoe felt bouncy, but I really had to position myself almost to maximise the bounce in the right direction. I felt a bit too pogo-y. Whereas actually with the Alphafly 3, I find it unbelievably easy to engage the plate in this. Like late in races, just feels like I'm rolling straight onto those housing pods. I feel the firmness of those more probably than on the Alphafly 1, which maybe what you're talking about there, Tom, but compressing a bit more into those air zoom pods, and I really feel them punch the energy along, which is the big difference between the Vaporfly 3 and the Alphafly 3 for me, is those pods on the front. You really feel them, the extra punch you get. So when I did a 10k in these shoes, and the final few k, I was probably got out a bit quick. I was struggling, but the pace was just being maintained. I really found it easy just to keep turning over. And I think maybe I'd have struggled a little bit more in the Alphafly 1 just because I'd had to be running quite well. And actually, quite interesting because actually I did a 10k within a couple of months in both of these shoes. They brought loads of caveats. One was the Brighton 10k with you, Tom, we did in the Alphafly 1 where it was really windy, but actually the first half of the race there was a massive tailwind, and I ran a really fast 5k, then struggled through 3k in a good group though, and then had a really fast final k. Whereas the Alphafly 3 was in Battersea Park, which obviously flat as a pancake, but it was a night run, by myself, a solo run basically. I wasn't in any kind of group. So both had their advantages and disadvantages, and I run like within a second of the time. So that's what we're talking about here. Like there's very fine margins. I think I could run pretty much equally good times in both these shoes. Although that in itself is interesting that since the Alphafly 1, I don't think there's been a clear-cut shoe that I would say would take loads more time off your PBs compared to it. And that's in general what we talked about with carbon shoes the other day, actually, how it's hard to keep improving on them when you've got those limits. But like I say, I do for that more flowing feeling of the ride of the Alphafly 3. And I think it's a bit easier for me to get the punch from the pods in it with the way it's set up now. And it's a little bit lighter, which is never a bad thing. Mine is pretty disgusting now. Sorry about that. It's got quite muddy on that 20 miler I did the other day.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. It probably comes down to I think over 5k, 10k, I don't think it would make a difference for me. I think I get exactly the same sorts of times in both these shoes. I think marathon, I would notice a difference. I think I'd be looking at minutes in a marathon just because of those final miles where I just need that. I just want that bounce. I just want the feeling of the Alphafly 1. But yeah, also I'm probably hitting almost directly on those pods every time I'm running, so that's why I'm getting that tip off, that bit of bounce probably that you're not getting in the same way. But yeah, I mean, I like them both, but
well,
better do the verdict then.
Yeah, we should probably get to the verdict.
Okay, this is going to be an interesting one actually. I think, because I mean it's pretty obvious what we're going to go for, but it probably doesn't make it necessarily easier for people to pick which shoe to get apart from the price.
Well, yeah, there's the price, and maybe if you already have one. So I do prefer the Alphafly 3. If you have the Alphafly 1 at home in a fresh box and you've got it there, I wouldn't say go and rush out and buy the 3. You've still got a great shoe, especially if you already like it and you love it and it feels like it works for you. There's no need to go and rush out and buy the new shoe. I think it's almost kind of divided. There's people who love the latest version and there's people who are very loyal to previous shoes and will, I know runners, for example, who will tell me 100% the Vaporfly 4% is the best super shoe, the one, the original one, the lower stack, the nimble one, and they haven't improved on it since, and that's because they've run loads of great times on that shoe and it really works for them, and there is a lot of loyalty with shoes like that. So I think the Alphafly 1, if you've got it at home, you stick with it until you run it into the ground. Hard to find new versions of it these days, although we did manage to find it the other day, didn't we, Tom, for a discount? Really good shoe. I think the Alphafly 3 works better for me. I think the way this shoe is set up now, I think makes it a more versatile all-distance racer. I think it also just will help lots of runners in the final few Ks. I know Tom says it doesn't work from the final few Ks. I think it will help lots of runners in the final few Ks who slight drop off. They start shuffling a bit more like I do. You get a more kind of easy engagement of the plate in the new shoe, and I think you get a bit more pop from the pods. All fine margins, but I prefer the Alphafly 3. But if you're seeing the Alphafly 1 for £100, which is what I bought it for, before Berlin a couple of years ago, it's never going to be a bad deal. How about you, Tom?
I'm definitely going to go for the Alphafly 1. I mean, for the I think I got these for about £110 or something like that, which is absolutely incredible for this shoe to get it for that price. I think it largely comes down to obviously the style of the runner you are. I think for me, if you're watching this video and you're the sort of runner that really likes a noticeable bouncy feeling from the shoes, I'd go Alphafly 1. And I know there's loads of you out there because you sometimes comment on how you like bounce. But I think that's really the big difference in these two shoes. I don't think necessarily it's a performance difference. I think it's a feel difference that's designed for like your style of running and what you want to get out of a shoe. But the price is the ultimate thing here, isn't it? Even if the Alphafly 3 was very, very marginally better for me than the Alphafly 1, for the price, I don't think it's worth the extra cost that you're putting into it. It's not like shoes 5 years ago where the difference between generations was enormous. Now it's a difference in feel more than anything. I don't think it's a massive performance difference for most people. So I definitely get the Alphafly 1. I'm definitely going to race in the Alphafly 1 more than I'm going to use the Alphafly 3 still. So I really need to buy some more of these actually if I can get them cheap.
Keep hunting for them.
And to be honest, I think I'm going to like the Alphafly 2 when I finally get hold of it.
Well, it's an interesting one because I think they really maxed out the bounce there, but it is a fair bit heavier and it is kind of a bit wider and more grounded, and it's that really falls. It's just the debate I'm also having with a couple of shoes at the moment, like the Hoka Cielos. Like they're heavier, but they just seem to work so well. And like when I ran the Valencia Marathon in the Alphafly 2, I ran a 2:29 there. And it's not my PB, but it might be the best marathon I've ever run, just because I did Berlin, had a couple of months off light training because I fractured a rib and I got COVID, and I came back into it with no expectations and just ran. I've never felt like so strong as I did in that shoe, just because it is so bouncy, but I don't know. I think if you love the Alphafly 1 that much, I think you've got enough bounce in the Alphafly 1. I don't think you need to. And then you save a little bit of weight. It's a bit more nimble all round, and it's really interesting what they've done with the line. And I do think like the Vaporfly moved close to the Alphafly, and the Alphafly moved close to the Vaporfly, and maybe they should push back the differentiation with the next generations, just so people have a bit more of a difference and a bit more of a choice. The way ASICS sets up its shoes with the different drops and everything like that, but. Ultimately, I think with all carbon shoes these days, apart from a couple that are a bit worse, they're all really, really good. And might maybe just go for the one that's got the nicest colour, because this blue is outrageously nice on the Alphafly 1. I will say that.
It's better than this colour.
Yeah, the orange one you have is nice though.
Well, every time I go to the start line of Parkrun now, there's about 15 people with these on, because it was the only colourway in the sale. That is
the one that's left across all sales. It's that purple colourway. The new yellow one of these is coming out soon, and that looks pretty nice, I have to say. But anyway, yeah. Great shoes. Enjoy them.
Yeah, and sorry we couldn't be more useful in.
Well, I think we've nailed down differences. I think it's important to say because a lot of people go like, "Oh no, the Alphafly 1 is for really fast people," and that kind of thing. I don't think it is a speed thing so much. I think I'm slightly faster than you, but people who I know who are faster than me prefer different shoes to me and prefer different shoes to you. And I think it is a bit more about gait and the kind of way you put force into a shoe sometimes, as opposed to just your speed.
That's it from us on this Versus. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the little bell, all those things that put a smile on our faces. And if you go into Catch and Blow, you can find a link to the podcast, which comes out at the end of each month. But we're also doing extra ones at the moment because we're trying to get around to answer a lot of your questions. So if you've sent us a question in, we may answer it on our Points of Shoe podcast. Right, catch you next time.